Hello, Perplexing Ruins.
Good morning. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. I heard you on a podcast a while back. It was Wobblies and Wizards,
Yeah,
and Logar. He scooped me yet one more time.
I just listened this morning to his conversation with Alex from I Am a Horned One. Excuse me. Yeah,
Yeah, he definitely. I don't know. I'm still amazed at him being able to produce a podcast every day.
day. Yeah, it's amazing, but pretty cool service, I guess.
Yes, yes. I think he should be paid in coffee because I think that's what gets him through. So.
He's like the Balzac of podcasters.
Yes, he is. It's quite amazing. So anyway, yeah, it's been, and so I think what happened is he interviewed you, I think, and I'm not, sure how the circumstances work out, just about the time that I started noticing your work popping up on Twitter.
Okay.
And I think that's probably, I don't know, that's probably not even a year ago, was it? Like maybe
No,
by
it's
the
just
time.
a few months ago, I think he had me on.
Yeah. So, and obviously, but what makes your art style differs quite a bit from a lot of, I'd say, more the stuff we traditionally see. But I guess the question is like, so what got you started with producing? Well, I actually have a Patreon, and you've been producing work. So what's kind of driven you to this direction? What's been the impetus to this?
Yeah, well, I have an art degree, and for over 10 years, I sort of off and on pursued that and had some successes and some nots, as is how it goes. Then I was in like a kind of a real rut, and then I started doing this whole new thing well, this is 2 years ago now, I guess, or 3 years ago, where I just started doing these more fantastical characters. I used to do a lot of historical based painting, and I started getting really into that with felt. I started gluing felt strips onto canvases and in my kitchen, just cutting up hundreds and hundreds of pieces of felt and making these fantastical characters. And long story short, I finally just like began to embrace my inner nerd, so to speak. I've been a closet nerd my whole life, I guess, and just really decided to paint that way. And then started discovering about that same time RPGs. And I hadn't played a tabletop game or video game since middle school, maybe. And then, and it coincided with COVID and just all these things gelled at once. And this whole new world exploded right in front of me, right when I happened to need it on a very personal level. And I went from this struggling, floundering, uprooted person to finding something to latch onto that just like did a lot of positive things for me. And so I started just, unlike my quote unquote fine art career, such as it was, I started sharing my work. Like I used to just not do that very much and bash on my stuff. And I just jumped in. I said, fuck it. I'm getting older and I'm tired. And I started sharing work in RPG areas like Reddit mostly and Instagram. And I just decided to create this Perplexing Ruins moniker to sort of be behind to help me overcome anxiety in social spaces. And then some people were like, hey, that's a cool drawing. And it kind of went from there.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is I think there's, especially the explosion of the indie community / zine. Yeah, I think people are looking for things with more heart and things that are less formulaic, or at least popular, I guess.
So, I think, from what I gather, now granted, I'm not a deep RPGer. I've been playing like a lot of my friends since I was young, I'm pretty new. But I think a lot of people see old school art and Wizards of the Coast art. And that's kind of what it is, right?
Yes.
And then now you've got all these amazing artists like just dumping whatever cool stuff they make, their own work into their zines, their projects. And I think people love that. And I see a lot of times people on social media like, oh, I can't draw. I wish I could draw. And I'm thinking, drawing is taking a thing and marking on a surface. You can draw, anybody can draw. And I think a lot of people actually love seeing that personal voice come out. And now you get these zines full of, you know the scene. Little drawings, sketches, doodles, whatever.
Yeah, I think the thing is, for me, it's, especially if you're producing something, if you're publishing something, is you kind of want some sort of consistency. Like, I think having the doodlings won't necessarily hold up if you're also putting up other traditional style of art. But if you say, you know what, I'm going to embrace this whole feel, do it yourself, DIY, lo-fi, whatever, and just embrace it in its entirety, then I think it works.
I agree. And it's not for everyone, right? People latch on to some and not others. But it's this space where people can have their voice, and some hear it and some don't, but it's just cool like that, right? Like, and I guess I personally latched onto that. And somebody saw one of my early felt paintings. It's actually on a zine called Broken Luck now. Eco saw that. He was like, whoa, that's cool. And it felt good, for somebody like something I spent 25 hours on and like it. And then as I got more in the scene, I tried to develop some of the skills like, more traditional people would enjoy, so I can offer more of a variety from a commercial perspective, all the while trying to learn how to make my own stuff. So
yeah, and that's the hard part, right? We're all kind of coming this trying to figure out how to navigate this world of at least trying to make some sort of income off of it.
I think you're right. It's hard, and there's a variation on who's making a living, who's not, who wants to, who cares to, who doesn't. That can be tough to navigate in my experience. And I think you just do what you can and find your spot.
Yeah, I think that's just it. You have to do, I think it behooves us all to do the best that we can at the moment, release it, and don't look back in a way that's negative. It's just like, if things have improved, you're like, wow, I've come a long way. Not like, oh, what was I thinking, 3 years ago?
Yeah. I'm a naturally negative, pessimistic person. And I think, like a lot of creators, I'm probably my worst critic. But, I've been making pictures for a long time. I can't get away from it. It's something I just do. And I've tried writing. I've written thousands of words, hundreds of pages as trying to write essays and fiction too throughout my life. It's just what I do. I sit down and make stuff. That's, what I do. I can't not do that. And I get the feeling there's a lot of people in our scene that are like that. And they just happen to like gaming, right? So they channel all that energy into it, and we'll see what comes out of it,
Yeah.
I love that part about it.
And I think, there's also a difference between people who are, also doing this as as we'll call extracurricular, like, it's, and then other people are trying to, navigate their way into like earning a living or partial learning or supplementing their income. But yes, this does definitely allows people, I think, the opportunity to dabble and see how things go, and then be able to, push more in one direction if they so choose.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. And I always personally have to face that question. Am I doing this professionally or as a hobby or both? And I don't know, I have to ask that. It's weird when you don't have a job.
All society, the way we're judged, and we judge ourselves, right?
Yeah. Like I haven't had a real job in, I guess, 3 years now. So no paychecks for 3 years. So this is, I try my best to make it work to help my family, supplement my family's income. Luckily, we're in a position where I can do this as much as I can while doing other family obligations and stuff. But it's hard. It's hard. I think a lot of people don't realize it's fun, but it can be very hard too. Like you grind if you're trying to make
right
income.
Yeah. So right now I've have so my Kickstarter completed, I think it was last week. Seems like it was longer ago.
Yeah, congratulations.
Well, thank
you.
you.
Really fun.
And then this week I took a week off from work just because I need to burn up some time. But I'm also just like spending quite a bit of time, probably more time working than I was at my job working. And I think this is where I'd like to go, but it's like, there's got to be not that I'm feeling completely unbalanced this week, but it's like, if I decide to try and make a go of this in a couple of years, it's like, I need to find, some sort of healthy limit to this.
Is this your first Kickstarter?
No, it's my third.
So you're a pro, you're a veteran.
Oh yes, exactly. I survived the first one. So if you do two,
so it's stressful. I just completed mine and just finished fulfillment. And oh my gosh, it's so consuming, you probably know what you're doing now by this point. Totally.
No, I'm at the point where I start knowing questions to start asking. I'm not the one with answers, because it's so like so what I'm working on now is BackerKit. Never did BackerKit before, so there's a degree of risk and fear I have with that, because normally you collect your like for instance, you collect your shipping fees normally through Kickstarter, and they get a chunk of that. Well, now I'm going to charge it through BackerKit. If I messed up, and I kind of partially charge some. It's weird, but then like, well, what if happens if something messes up with BackerKit and I don't get my shipping out? Like I don't know, and I'm dealing with POD and how to handle POD, and do I offer? It's just it's not better. It may be worse.
I'm unfortunately for you, sadly, I'm a little relieved to hear your woes, because they sound a lot like what I just went through on my first. And I just used Kickstarter House platform. I thought about BackerKit, and then I was like, oh shit, I don't need to learn a second platform this week. And it's so stressful.
It is.
Everybody sees from the outside like, oh wow, you raised this money and you made this thing, and all I do is like, oh shit, shipping's twice as much as I thought it was going to be, because I too made an error logistically, and it was like, okay, this is smart. So I hope you get it worked out where you're comfortable and it works for you.
Well, the next step is also, I'm planning on doing even more publishing. Now the question becomes of inventory strategies. POD, inventory, how much inventory? Do I do inventory when it sells out, switch over? I don't know.
So I used to have a career as a bookseller for about 8 years. I sold books. And it's fun until the IRS is like, what about your inventory? I spent 3 weeks fretting on how to answer the dang question. And it's a thing, right? If you do business of any kind, there's the whole business.
I think if you are a person that produces your own stuff, like Trevor Stamper does, you probably keep your inventory, your finished goods inventory low.
Yeah, well, you keep it. Unless
you have raw material, then you produce like 25 zines, and then you can stop, and then you can sell them out and just print as you need. But if
then you're not sitting on it, right? But it's a weird thing to navigate, right? So it's just another component, because position I guess you and maybe I are both in is like, we're kind of small businesses learning how to be small businesses, while just trying to make something we like for people that they like, hopefully. And it's a weird thing. It's a weird, hard thing for me anyway.
It is.
I'm not a very overly careful person, maybe, so it's just like bumbling my way through, but whatever. I made something, people like it, that's good.
Yeah, well, I kind of, I think there's a certain value in just throwing yourself in with kind of, I won't say with wild abandon. I mean, you need to, you don't want to be completely stupid, but like,
No.
but I didn't know about POD, how I really wanted to handle it. And I just realized I was losing out a lot of people from Europe not buying a physical zine without doing POD. So I thought, well, I'll just do POD. And I thought, well, it'd just be a small amount of people. I can absorb it if it goes sideways. But then the Kickstarter was more successful than I thought. And I got like 50 people doing POD. It's like, so the stakes are higher to get it right.
So congratulations. That feels good. That's cool. I had the same thing with Fallen though. I was like, 100 people will probably be interested in this. And then it actually was quite successful. And I was like, oh shit.
So I don't know that
deal with this.
I follow you on Twitter. I don't know that I realized that Fallen was on Kickstarter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes. 9 months ago it went, 8 months ago.
So are you on the RPG Zines, the Facebook group?
I don't do Facebook, so
okay.
No, I'm not.
If I would recommend, if you ever so inclined, you want to just create a fake profile, whatever, that's a very, very great, it's a very good group to be part of. In fact, I would say as a business, you should be, because we allow people to hawk their wares and services.
Oh, okay.
And it's like,
I'll have to look into it.
Well, there's like 3,000 people in this community. So it would behoove you, I think, to check that out. Cause I think there could be commissions plus, just things you can learn too from other people.
I was part of some Discord groups where I like try to learn, like, how do you guys do this? How do you handle that? And, just learning, like you said, kind of throw yourself in with cautious abandon and see what ends up happening. With Fallen, it was like, okay, I'm gonna do this Kickstarter, and I kind of maybe even jumped the gun a little. Some people are like, you should slow down, and I was like, no, I'm excited. And then it kind of went big. We had over 800 backers, and
oh my goodness, you really did well. That's 21,707.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But when it's all said and done after production, I added on card decks. And the shipping, I ended up having to ship the books and the card decks separate because production finished too far apart. So I shipped 452 packages twice, a bunch of them abroad. And then I had like 9 contributors, I tried to pay them as fairly as I could. And
wow.
So basically I don't really love talking numbers and stuff, but for this perspective, you see 21 and then it's significantly less, significant. Shipping, I tried to post something about this recently on social media because I know a lot of people jump in like, oh yeah, this is cool. And I've heard it so many times from my friends. I did Kickstarter and shipping wiped me out. I charged X for shipping, which was too low. And then I ended up having to ship it twice.
What do you mean you had to ship it twice?
Well, I got my books and I fulfilled them. I shipped books all over the world. And then the cards came in like 2 months later, and I didn't want people to wait. So I shipped all the cards, and I was like, well, it's just a deck of cards. That shouldn't be much.
Oh, yeah. Might as well be shipping a brick. Might as well be shipping a gallon of milk.
The first day I went to the post office, I was like, you're kidding. That's how much a deck of cards is? And then I did the math, and it ended up being like $4,000 later.
Oh no.
And and I don't regret it at all. That was my mistake as a logistic learning small dude. I think the decks are fucking rad, if I can say that, and they're cool, and people seem to like them. Really, I say that story as if you're getting into the crowdfunding. Do this research better than I did. Don't just. I got so excited on making. I'm a maker. I sit down every day and make stuff. That's what I do. I draw, I write, I doodle, I sketch. And I shipped out 452 packages twice. And it was about over 100, or maybe it was about 85 to 100 international packages. So
yeah, I've
anyway,
only shipped international. So here's what I would suggest. Drive-through RPG also has a card site. You can do POD.
I've been told by friends next time do print on demand, you fool. And I will, trust me. But that being said, the whole thing was also fun and exciting, and I made something that I think people like, so I'm excited for that.
Well, but the thing is, you didn't do so. I'm an incrementalist. Okay. So I start with a thing and then I crank it up a little bit each time. You ran, jumped, and you leapt into the abyss across the crevasse, trying to reach the other side.
That describes some of my life, probably, actually. Don't do it the way I do it.
But you worked. You didn't go bankrupt.
I think so. I didn't go bankrupt. I made a product that I'm quite proud of. And I was, by all accounts, I think, successful in doing a responsible fulfillment. You know, I hear enough stories about people getting screwed by Kickstarters or waiting so long, and I was terrified of letting people down. So I think it's a success. I think that's good.
Well, so it's interesting in that because when your Patreon is what attracted me, but then I was seeing these cards. It didn't really, it wasn't making sense. Not that I tried to make sense of it. Like, I don't understand now. Now the cards all make sense.
Because they were so different?
No, it's like, I didn't understand why. I think my assumption was, and maybe it is I haven't had much time to really pay attention to many things lately. But my thought was that these cards were meant to supplement an existing like old school essentials or something, that somehow this was like were story cards meant to stand on their own. But maybe they do, but it looks like it's actually in relation to Fallen, right?
They're technically a Fallen Oracle deck. There's even the word Fallen on the back of them.
Yeah.
But they are system agnostic. There's no statistics. They are strictly Oracle cards. So they're flavored towards Fallen, that world. But you could use them for almost any fantasy style game.
Okay.
And that was the plan, to make something a little more universal. I mean, the monster decks, you can't see the thing, but the monster decks are Fallen. They're just the bestiary from the book produced into tarot size cards. But in theory, you could use both decks in front of you, draw one from one to create your entire hook, and then draw a creature card and create your monster for that adventure. And each card could be a one-shot. So there's 20 Oracle cards, 20 bestiary cards. Each Oracle card I did two, so there's 40 illustrations for the cards. And those are, none of those were all separate from the Patreon. So, but the Patreon, I actually made an announcement this week, is going to be leaning more towards Fallen. So part of the goal is to develop another 20 cards, and I'll be using the Patreon to get feedback on that and develop those.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is, if I recall correctly, you also up the, I think it was from $1 to $2.50 for the use of clip art or the stock art.
Stock art's all at $2.50,
and that is such a good deal.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm like, Dollar's like, you are not charging enough.
Well, I've been told that, and then I've also been told I don't put out enough or good enough sometimes. So it goes both ways. There are better artists than me that only charge $1. So that's something you have to decide personally. Frankly, on my Patreon for $2.50 a month, you get access to almost 240 illustrations right now.
Well, and to me, one thing I thought of, because I'm always thinking, not always, but I think about these things quite a bit, but it's like, I thought you could also do a tier where one could just be, lower resolution images, and the other one would be higher resolution images.
Too much work.
Okay, I understand that. for the differentiation that you'll gain.
For the $1 tier right now, it's just like, oh, PR is kind of cool. Here's a tip. And then $250, you get all the stuff. At $250, you also get the games, the books, the zines. The $5 tier, you get stuff mailed to you occasionally, and then the $10 tier, you get stuff mailed to you occasionally.
Yeah, it's and I think the thing is like it's like I say, it's definitely a huge amount of value. At least for me, I made a commitment. Well, I say commitment, but for the Gary's appendix, I have, it's really two separate things. There's the bestiary, and then there's going to be everything else. And so, using Dean
It's
Spencer
very exciting,
stuff.
man. It looks like a cool project.
Yeah, I hope. I am pretty excited about it. I try. I try not to. There's probably a little bit of pessimism. Not to say pessimism. I tend to stop myself from down talking things. But yes, I'm very excited. But I definitely, your style is definitely different from Dean's. But it's like, but I'm not going to use your illustrations for the bestiary. But anything that I will illuminate from the bestiary, like deities or whatever, I'll put articles on the other side, and I can use your work for that and for other articles. And I think it maintains a consistent feel.
Just as a quick side note, my patrons are always welcome to say, hey, could you make more like this or more like that? I try to ask every now and then. But patrons are always welcome to make suggestions, and I can't ever guarantee, but I try my best to get something for everyone. And anyway, that's just something, as things progress with my patrons, some have been on there for a while, I try to help make stuff everyone can use.
Yeah, and I also too, it's like I try and keep different projects kind of separate. But then there's another project I'm working on for it's like I bet one of your pieces of art would work great for that. I flipped through like, yep, this will work perfect. Even
and that makes me thrilled, man.
Yeah, I'll probably using somebody else's for the rest of it. It's like, no, this is a very unusual thing. And I think this very unusual thing will be whatever it is that you do. I know if I'm looking for a feel.
Yeah.
To me, it's a very primal, very, I don't know how to describe it. Whoever it is, I got to feel what I can get from, I can start flipping through your art, and I'll know I'll find something that'll work.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that. That's what art does, right? Like some pieces click and some don't. And that's what you do with it, right? Like illustrators, and I make no claims to being a great illustrator. I am so aware that there are many amazing illustrators in our scene, and I try to learn from them all the time. But everyone brings something different too, I think, and it's picking what works, what doesn't, and I just put out a pamphlet this week, and I'm a patron of other people myself, and I use one of art from somebody I support, because I couldn't come up with that character. And I try to make a point of pride of illustrating most of my own stuff, but the more into this I get, I'm like, oh, there's people that just do things better.
Well, I won't say better, because I don't think that's right. It just it isn't as fitting. Like there's something that it just fits. It's not better, it fits.
I think you've put it better than I did.
Because there's another person I use for another project, and their stuff is it's good, but it's not. It's like, I would say it doesn't look like super professional, but when you use it throughout the whole thing, it does give a consistency, and it works.
There you go.
But I would say this person necessarily a great art, no, but the stuff they do, it really works. It's very fitting, for that. You would not want to put it in a Wizards of the Coast would never use it in their books, and it would be fitting for that. But for a certain style of zine, it works really well.
So in terms of your zine that you just worked on, I kind of love this idea of like module journals, from what I understand back in the day, like Dragon and White Dwarf, maybe. I
Yeah.
might be misspeaking. Like these journals, right, that came out with articles and bits. And I've been kind of getting into those recently, like with more essay. I guess it's kind of like blogs in print a little bit, with little dungeons or bits or characters, whatever they choose. I like that. So what's going on with that for you? How does that work for you?
Well, I mean, what I'm looking for, well, there's a couple things. I really the probably the greatest. There's two things that were going on. One is I really wanted to just kind of do more like just more academic style, not me writing. I had several things going on. There's a lot of things going on. There's always
like you're
just
busy.
do something. One thing I really wanted to do, which did not work out. I thought I had a guy, but it just didn't work out. What I really wanted to do early on was a civilization zine where it focused on, like, say, Manoa or Egypt or whatever, and it would be like the things that you would just need to know, and you could read it and you could come to an understanding of what it would be to play or run a game in that setting. Like, what do these people think? What are the religious, like, not just what do they believe, but like, how does that rubber meet the road in the lives of people, and how would that affect gameplay? So, if I'm a follower, if I, if I'm, Grecian, they're not monotheistic. They follow all the gods, but you know what? If their daily routine may be doing certain things, and that is what the life of a Bronze Age person in a Grecian society would be like, and you could, and the idea is to have different societies, and then people could read through those. It just would be like informative, and basic GMs could pick and choose what they wanted to put into their own.
That's ambitious and sounds very difficult.
Well, yeah, it failed. I thought the plane was taken off, but it never left the runway. So,
you know, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't think I could do something like that. It's too hard to read into other stuff. I think in terms of world building, the thousand islands kind of comes to mind. Are you familiar with that project?
no.
By pardon me for mispronouncing, Zedek Chu. He and Munkau put out this amazing group of zines, and I think there's 12 of them. It's called Thousand Islands, and it's like, and I actually don't recall the country he's from, but it's all based on their Eastern culture.
Oh, so it would be like Southeast Asia, and maybe
yeah, I don't want to misspeak from where they're from. I don't.
So what you have is multiple islands, and each one probably has a certain distinctness about them. They're not
It
like
does,
a monoculture.
and they're beautiful. Yes, and they're beautiful. They're interesting, but they're not they're rooted in fantasy and their folk tale and history and stories and stuff. But it's also fantasy based world building, and that comes to mind, and they're writing from their perspective, and they created this epic world. You buy the bundle and it's this big pack of zines, and they're all distinct and all illustrated throughout, like you're saying, by the same artist. Yeah. It just has this beautiful, and I'd love to see more of that, like giant collections of worlds from all over the world would be great, written by those people.
Right. Well, it's kind of like, comics. I think in my 20s, when they were trying to change things around in movies and put people different color and different roles, and I'm like, you know what? They're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And then as I get older, it's like, you know what? This is pretty boring. It's the same old white people in the same white situations. Like, it would be much more interesting if you said, well, what happens if Captain America was black, or what happened if Captain America was a woman, and explore some nuances rather than the same old, like, 60 years of the same old nonsense.
I totally share that perspective, man. You know, I mean, I don't know how far we get into this, but the Lord of the Rings right now, right?
Yeah.
That's the big thing right now. And I'm amazed how many people I see making a big deal about their choices. I'm like, so what? It's a fantasy story. They're trying to tell it from a perspective of actual humanity, you know, and I love that about it. I think that's so interesting. I mean, really, frankly, we're talking about a damn book that's from back in the day that people love, but so do what you want with it. And I think that's cool. I think we could use those perspectives, frankly, and those
Well,
visuals.
and I think the other thing too is I think we often don't estimate the power that fiction, because this is really kind of very much like the legends and the lore and the myths that were created years ago, and it was to inspire people, I think, in many ways to, and especially superhero stories. I think nowadays of reflecting, things of justice and rightness and being able to change the world. And there's a lot of like very positive messages, but if there's nobody that is shown in those positive ways other than just white guys, it's like, well, girls should have their heroes too that should be powerful and stand up to injustice, and people of color should have young kids should be able to see people like them in roles of positions of justice and power and being able to change the world. Like, we all need that inspiration. Like, when I don't see that, but it's like, but that's necessary for a good society.
It's like the Kickstarter from last year. I did not back this one, but Coyote and Crow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
All written by Native American First Nations peoples. And how cool, like completely alters the whole spectrum and division of perspectives. And why wouldn't we want that in our stories? That's what I'm thinking, And frankly, just as a side note, as far as superhero stories go, they're boring. They're all the same. Cast and characters aside, I mean, this is why Black Panther was successful, right? Because it was an entirely different tale. It's what it felt like, and not to mention it's just interesting. But so many of them are not, and I'm freaking tired of them. I can't wait for them to go away. And I'm not a comic book junkie. I don't watch many cartoons, but God, we need new stories. We really, really do. Anyway, that's my rant against corporate comic book movie culture stuff. They're all the same.
Well, and I understand
why about people who are different,
Yeah. Well, the problem is I think it's not always nefarious on the part of corporations. It's just that when you're spending, $500 million, you want the safest bet, and you're going to pick the most the most vanilla that you can possibly get. And it's
just go build a homeless shelter with that money instead.
Yes.
I don't know. Sorry, I'm gonna make a lot of people annoyed by this, so I'm sorry, but I'm not.
No.
Anyway, I don't try to share too many of my opinions, so those are
it. A hot take from PR. There'll be a whole segment.
I spent a lot of time looking at art, right? Like, I've gone to a ton of museums. I have hopped on planes to fly cross country to go to a gallery show by a painter from Sweden. I've gone to Europe to just go see certain artists' work in person. Like, I've looked at a lot of fucking art. And then you get to see something like Watsy Productions and how boring it is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, why? What? I mean, I get it, because you need lowest common denominator, which is the way to produce and sell stuff, so you can maximize things. But there is so many more interesting perspectives to be told and skill sets to explore. And that's one thing I think why I latched onto this scene so much, to bring this all back to what we actually do daily. It's like, when I try to spend a lot of time looking at quote unquote outsider art, folk art, self-taught artists. That's some of the stuff I resonate most with. And I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot of self-taught artists in this scene, you know, like just making shit. Like, oh, I had this weird thing and I doodled this up and it's interesting. and and I latched onto the scene because there's a lot of that, you know, and it's not the Xerox punk days of making black and white zines, but I don't know.
No, but same thing for the people who are writing too.
Totally. There's a lot of weird shit being written.
Yeah, and it's like you can do that. It's that space that you'll never ever see with WotC. Never.
No, and WotC has its place. I don't want to knock them or anything, I guess, really, but I guess I'm just thinking, goodness, just like big movies. There's a lot of cool stuff, and that's what I try to find. Anyway, that's my
I think what's odd is I've never seen the Joker. It's just not my thing. But it's interesting how something that was given a little bit of money and not really much expectation, and is taking things in a very different direction, does incredibly well.
Which one?
The Joker, the movie with I don't know, it came out like 4 years ago or so. It's with who is that with? I don't remember.
Is this the Joaquin Phoenix?
That's it. I was afraid I was going to. Yes, the Joaquin Phoenix. I was afraid I was going to name somebody that was actually dead, getting him confused with another person. But it's like, yeah, it's like, you know, whether I've never seen the movie. It doesn't appeal to me. But I mean, the fact of the matter is like, they just kind of did a thing and it worked. And it was not a high budget movie, and it worked. And it's just like, you know, you kind of, you know, it's like they try something and something kind of works, and then it becomes a formula. Whatever exactly that is, let's make it a template and go forward. Whether it's a Batman movie, like Batman movies successful, they must all be dark, they must all be gritty. Batman must be, you know, have this attitude, and all our universe must reflect this darkness going forward. Like, well, no, it worked for this particular story, but that doesn't mean that it's like
right. Yeah, I don't know. You get into whole theories of camp and not camp at that point. And I'm not smart enough to comment too much there.
Yeah, and it's interesting as far as, you know, the stuff that's out there, the freedom, the art, and I think zines and RPGs is still in a very, you know, it's still in early stages. I mean, it's as a medium, it's not. I think the depths are only really started getting explored maybe like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I mean, you know, it was kind of on a certain path, and then the group of people said, well, what about this? What about that? Let's deconstruct and reimagine. And I think it's kind of been on an interesting path since then.
I can't speak to that early history of it. But it certainly is interesting to me. It's a unification of all things I love: story, art, books. You know, these are the things that drive me. Graphics, and I think that's why I like it so much. There's not a single day almost that if I hop on social media, I'm like, oh dang, that's cool, or you know, I get something fresh. That's part of the difficulty of it, is, you know, it's DIY and indie, but it's massive when you're in it. You know, there's a lot coming out all the time. It can be hard to keep up.
Oh, it definitely is. And I think because Kickstarter made things viable, economically viable, it changed the landscape.
It seems to have, because it's simple, relatively, aside from things we talked about earlier.
But if you would have done this before, you would have printed out maybe on your own, maybe 100 copies of Fallen. You'd try to go around to different stores, maybe try selling Itch or whatever, and you would not have done very well. But
and you'd be going to conventions and things.
Yes.
I've sold a few of my things to some local stores, and it's a weird thing, you know. It's door-to-door salesman thing. Knock on the door. Here's a thing I made. Do you want to try it? And you come into the store 6 months later and there's a copy sitting there all rifled through next to like DCC full line and D&D full line.
Yes.
You're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty out of place here.
I
Now
think,
kudos to the shop who bought the stuff. That was really cool of them.
oh, right. And they're supporting, they're, you know, I don't want to say, unless it's something really, really high, I mean, they're supporting you is what they're saying.
That's the whole point. And I was so like stoked and grateful. But there's like a weird battle or it's not even a battle. It's just like a weird, okay, yep, I made this thing. And that goes to like, what are your designs on your future and ambitions and X, Y, and Z? Everybody has to decide that for themselves.
Yeah, well, I thought about, you know, somebody asked me about, you know, trying to, you know, get stores to carry various things I've done. I was like, I don't know, it's worth my time.
Yeah.
Like you go and you spend this, you drive, you spend time discussing, and maybe sell a couple copies, you know, at a discount. It's like, I don't know that it's
you know, for free RPG day, I actually put some stuff on a table this year. The shop gave me permission to drop some things in there, and I put things on there. And at first I was like, oh, this is really fun. And then I'm like, oh, these things probably got pulped.
right. Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's like my campaign notebook, granted it was nicely printed, but my campaign notebook next to like the new DCC RPG day module. It's like, what a joke. So and anyway, so well, I hope the thing goes good for you. It's really cool.
Yeah, well, and the other thing was the impetus too was also the Dungeon Master's Guide, the first edition, which is just a bunch of eclectic stuff written in Gygaxian prose that, you know, the choices are very interesting and odd. But I think by far it's probably if you look at any single RPG book that you could just pick up and read at any time, just flip through, it's probably the most readable of any product ever produced.
I've never read them.
I go get yourself a first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, and you want to,
okay.
You'll be shocked. It's like, imagine Wikipedia for gamers before there was the internet.
Mm.
You want to read about gemstones? Here's, you know, 7 paragraphs talking about gemstones.
Right.
You want to talk about diseases and parasites and where you get them and what your chances are based on environment? And there's a page on that.
I should probably try and do that. You know, I picked up the single D&D I have is the current Game Master's Guide, and I was curious about what tables were in it and things like that. So I picked that up, and there's surprisingly a lot of tables, but the rest of the book is didn't do much for me.
No.
So I'll have to check out the older edition.
Yeah, the first edition, as far as you can pick just a beat up copy, cheap, and it's just full of, it's even slightly disjointed, but that's part of the charm. Like, you really just don't know what all is going to be in there, and you can find things that will go on. He'll spend three pages talking about scribes.
That's a lot of scribe talk.
Yes, you're like, it's like, well, did you think proportionally, like, he spent more time talking about scribes than he did about other things? Like, why are there not more usages of scribes in?
That was his thing, huh?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if he was just trying to fill page count. I don't know. But it's all you flip through it. It's just an odds, and that's part of the reason too for it. It was is a zine where it just would be interesting articles where you could just pick up, flip through it, and it may not be like, you know, a new character class or whatever. It's just like, okay, let's take a subject, maybe even not even have any mechanics at all, but just talk about a subject.
I guess that's why your book interested me, you know, because it's like, I'm just gonna sit down. I got 15 minutes. You know, just like why magazines are great, right? You read
exactly.
an article, tuck it down, and yet it's I have a lot of game books now at this point, and there's a lot of repetition, a lot of the same stuff.
Right.
So you're mining it for the nuggets or the maybe prose sometimes. There's not a lot of great prose necessarily.
No, there's a lot of
The
bad.
game manuals, it's, I don't know. That's why back to basics journal that came out last year, it's like, oh, pick it up, or Knock magazine, pick it up, get some nuggets, and then set it down. And there's no commitment
Yeah.
beyond that.
And
It's
I would
pretty cool.
say it's kind of, akin to sort of that, where I definitely don't have the layout chops nor the desire to replicate that. But yeah, that was probably even more disjointed. But yeah, what I really loved about is the Knock issue I got. It's like they talked about, one of my favorite articles was the Keep on the Borderlands. The writer figured out where it was located, and he named a region in Canada and provided all the reasons for that. And you're like, wow, that's pretty fascinating.
Right. And then that's all you need from it, right? At that point. And I would say you don't need to replicate Knock either. I mean, it's fun, and it was super successful. And I love my Knock books. And yet there's space for more sparse or toned down or different demon. I don't know. That's the point of the whole thing, is there's space for a lot of perspective in our scene. And that's what I like about it. And people are very defensive of keeping that space, so we can all have a say and all have fun with it. And there's room for everyone to tell their bit, and that's cool. It's really fun.
Back in the days when I was doing a lot more photography, I would get with a friend or two, and we would just knock around. I really love going behind businesses in small towns and photographing stuff behind these old buildings. Like, you just find odds and ends. I mean, I really love the haphazard, wiring and utility panels to chairs with grills. Like there's like a life going on the other side of these small town.
The second story or something.
Yeah. And so, but the thing is like a person could go with 2 or 3 people, and you could literally photograph the same thing. But when you look at the images afterwards, they're different. I mean, they're completely different. The perspective is different. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. It's like we all see things at a different angle. And it's not like you say, well, you all just took a picture of this. Well, we did, but it's not the same.
For sure. I think that's a pretty great analogy, actually. Like photography in general does that so well. It's why so many people love it, right? It lets you share right there your perspective at that snap of a moment.
And I think the thing is, if you're a person who's contemplating your shot, then it becomes very much a reflection of how you view the world, or how you want the world. I mean, how you're approaching it. And the same thing with probably more traditional art. It's like, I want a picture of a man with a sword and a dragon. Okay, well, you can go many directions with that. Or you could even say, here's a picture of a person, here's a picture of a dragon. I want you to do a painting combining the two. Well, 2 artists, it will still come out different, even if their styles are very much the same.
For sure. That's something I try to remind myself of all the time. Like, for my own work, like, okay, this is okay. I'm not good at that, but I try.
But the thing is people okay. Are not, I think, if, at least for me, this is who I view it, because I could be off, but it's what I am buying as far as for art, from, I look at what you're doing, is I want you, whatever it is you produce there, that is unique, that is you. So whether it's perfect or not perfect, whether it doesn't reach ideal or not, that's what I'm buying, is the perfections and the imperfections that you bring. Same thing, like I have a perspective on things, and I think there's people that probably buy things, hopefully over time will say, Jeff has a perspective, I either like it or don't like it, but I'm buying it because that's a perspective that he brings, and that's something that engages with me. And I think that's where, as creatives, we're trying to be at, is, kind of find that voice, being true to us. Not saying we can't improve, but there is something we all bring that other people can't.
Yeah, I think that's totally it. And what makes it fun is the liberty to do that, right?
Yes. Yes. You don't have
And
somebody saying, coming back over your shoulder and saying, PR, could you clean us up a little bit? And could you have this guy holding the sword instead of a mace? And you don't have
yeah,
that.
being your own boss is a lot of fun some days. It's also a headache, but it's a lot of
Well,
fun
the
some
problem
days.
is you are, I think especially you, because you're trying to produce quite a bit is, and I think even me in some ways, because I want to be perspective, is like, you don't, you, if you had a boss, your boss would tell you what to do, and then you get paid for doing that thing. Or
Right.
here, it's that collective, like the people that exist outside of us that we don't necessarily know who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. That's from my patron perspective, for example, it's a lot of guess and check. I like to experiment, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. And when your whole sounding board, because just to be completely honest, I don't do this just for free, it's just for fun. I am
Right.
trying to pay some bills and things like that. It's a guess and check between what do I do that I just want to do that day, and how can I also make it so people want to consume it. And that's a hard thing to do. It actually is hard because I am my own boss. I literally have to sit down and make something. I just spent 12 hours on this piece probably over the last 2 days, and I just sat down and made it. And
Right.
it's all ink and watercolor, and it took a long time. And it's the last page of my sketchbook, and it's going to go to patrons, and people get that for $2.50. Now, do they like it or not? I don't fucking know, but I know I put a lot of effort into it, and it's one of those things where we're all doing that. It's a lot of guess and check, and unfortunately, social media is your sounding board in a lot of ways because it's not really a financial sounding board. We have shops, but I was somebody who was never on social media until 2 years ago. So I'm still learning what the hell it even is in a lot of ways. And
It's hard.
it's hard, it's exhausting, it's soul sucking in many ways. And yet, some of my greatest friends now, that's how I learned of them. So fuck if I know. All I know is I sat down and made this drawing, and I think it's pretty rad. It's going to go in the next Patreon adventure. It'll be a piece of stock art. And, it's a 9x11 drawing. And I don't know, people get to decide, I guess, right? But I made it, and I had to sit down and tell myself to do it.
Well, I think the thing too is, and this is it's hard. You're offering basically it's a package. So whatever you're contributing, you get. You're not selling them individually. But I think
No.
what's also hard is you have places for people to comment when you do. And what I found is what I would try and sell photography as art in art shows and different places, was that a lot of my pictures would get a lot of comments, but nobody was buying it. And I started and it hit me after a while, was that I think the people that were that would actually be buying that art would be the wives, the women, and they buy art for decor. And so just because people would be vocal and come to me and talk about, my photography of these barns or whatever, and love them, their wife's not gonna let them hang on the wall. They're not gonna buy it. It's like, it can be a summer kind of thing too. It's like, it's another thing. How do you navigate what to produce when you're going to be investing time and energy? And maybe the people that aren't talking are the ones that are your biggest, could be the people that are your biggest buyers, and the people that are vocal maybe don't represent the majority, but they're the only people you hear. It's a very difficult circumstance.
It is. Yeah, I don't know if I have a similar experience with women only buying art as decor or not.
Well, mine was, to be fair, like 11x14 framed, matted type stuff, not necessarily, smaller stuff. So it would be stuff that you'd probably would put in your living room or, something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to navigate that part, but um, I think you just make stuff. That's what it is, and whoever consumes it consumes it. I think making yourself available to a diverse group of people and trying your best and practicing authenticity and perhaps transparency, although art's not necessarily for that. Um, and you can go the Cezanne route where you pushed around a wheelbarrow of your rejected canvases, trying to hawk them. And that's one way, and that's romantic and interesting and sad at the same time. Or you try your ass off to get what you get. I don't know. It's hard to comment on any kind of creative success because so much of what we call success is not good. It sucks. A lot of consumed products aren't interesting
Well,
in the mass
and I think
world.
there's been a change because like where I'm at is a Midwest middle-aged people buying art, where I think now it's more acceptable. I think there's a larger market. So it really wasn't so. I mean, when I was growing up, it was not socially acceptable. There was no social cachet for being a nerd and for being a guy, and even less so for being a woman. Where I think now it's like it's so accepted by the younger generation and even older women now watching Marvel movies. I think there's probably much more acceptance to and desire for having that kind of media rather than trying to sell a black and white stark barn picture with high contrast clouds to a 50-year-old woman who can't see how it's going to look right with her couch.
Do you look at the photographer Richard Adams? I think is his name.
No.
Oh man, he's an amazing Western-based photographer, super stark, high key, minimal, gritty American Western. He did a beautiful book of like small, neglected churches on the prairie, and sort of like nitty gritty, minimal Ansel Adams without the epicness or something. Yeah. He's really great. He's really good. I think you'd maybe like his work. I used to see his books when I lived out west quite a bit. It's a pretty big deal. Anyway,
and there are people who have broken through, and the thing is, it's just I really was not able to achieve any notable level. When I say notable, I'd say notable. I mean, I would sell stuff, but it was never. It just didn't pay out. And same thing with portrait photography. I really loved doing certain things, but I didn't really enjoy just doing a normal portrait. Like I really enjoyed environmental portraits or trying things different where, all the mom really wants is a picture of her son or daughter smiling with a happy look on their face.
I don't know. I grew up in the Midwest and there's definitely a different perspective here. But I also spent a lot of time escaping it too. So, when I got out of art school, I started an art gallery co-op, and it was a minor rebellion against the stagnated scene of art that was there, and it ended up being the most attended gallery that year. We did like 9 or 10 shows, and chock full every opening. It's because people actually want that stuff, and people are actually nerds. The amount of nerdism out there is actually massive because people like weird, interesting shit, and we all live fantastically up here, right? So the more this culture of ours, society, I think, decides, we can take all these perspectives that are interesting. I think the world's gonna be way better for it. Now, whether we flood out first or burn to death first is a different story. But it's too bad it's taken this long. And, that's one thing I guess we could say thanks to fucking Marvel and WotC 4 is they've really said, like, be a nerd. It's okay, First time I really heard that when I read, I think Diaz, the Pulitzer Prize winner, who wrote The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. he basically was like, yeah, that's what I am. I'm a nerd. And he wrote a whole book about a chubby guy who's a nerd who loved comic books and superheroes. And he wins the Pulitzer Prize for it. And you can say whatever you want about the Pulitzer Prize. I mean, it's another, institution, who knows? But nonetheless, they chose something very different, a different kind of writer. And that was, I was a pretty young person at that point, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. There's a wide world out there of beautiful stuff. And I'm so excited to see it become less just fringe cult DIY underground, because that means we're richer for it.
Right.
Who doesn't want to be culturally rich, right? Informationally rich is something you can actually enjoy, because the rest of the world is pretty bleak right now in many ways. And so and our small scene offers a lot of richness with a lot of really cool people. There's your assholes, of course, but there's a lot of richness and wonder and interest and beauty. And that's why I do it. That's why I enjoy it. I have some really great friends that are just really decent people who make really cool stuff, and they celebrate other people making cool stuff, and people pay each other for that cool stuff. And the one subject that's difficult and I struggle with is sustainability of the scene and these things. If we're all passing money around from each other, that makes it hard. But I do see there being a cool way forward as it grows, and there being more space for all that stuff. But as long as, like I said, the earth doesn't fall flat first.
Well, I think the thing is, I mean, culture definitely is changing, and I kind of like similar. I would think like even the zine RPG is like, is it going to implode? Is this just like a bubble? But from what I can tell, there are more young people engaged in a way into this culture than I've ever seen. Like it's not going to go away. And I think it kind of made me think of, like, I've been watching Seinfeld. I've only just recently started watching Seinfeld. So it's on Netflix. I'm watching through all the Seinfelds. And of course
That's epic. That's epic.
Yeah, it is epic. And me being the person I am, I just kind of start analyzing things. And I believe that Jerry Seinfeld, as a person, I don't know if it's still true, but he loves Superman. There's Superman. There's a Superman statue on his shelf. A lot of times there'd be a magnet on there. Sometimes he'd be reading a Superman comic.
How about that?
Yeah. Sometimes Superman would find a reference actually in the dialogue.
And it's not ironic, right?
No, it's organic. It's like, it is very clear that to anybody watching the show that Jerry Seinfeld reads comic books, Superman comic books at least. And that was in the 90s. And I think what's happened is, I think he, was in the nerdom, but then there's a large group of us that were deep in the nerdom that were just a little bit older than him. And it wasn't great for us. But we loved what we loved, having the comic books. Society wasn't great. But then as we got older, we're the ones writing for TV shows. We're the ones writing for movies. That generation has
cultural vengeance.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Maybe so. Yeah.
And so, but anyway, but looking back, it's like there was a lot of water behind that dam. That dam's burst, and I don't think there's really going to be, I'm not saying things aren't going to change, but I don't see, it's kind of like comic books. This is the thing I never understood. Like comic books with women. Like, it's like Marvel and DC, like, we're completely blind to manga. Completely blind to manga. Manga comes on the scene, probably like the early 90s, mid 90s, in a big way. And you go to bookstores and it's like, go to the library, go look at the library section for manga. It's
Yeah,
huge, the section.
whole wall of it.
Yeah, whole audience. They said, we don't care about you. They said, okay, we'll go read manga because it's fun and we enjoy it. And I'm thinking, like, how blind and how dumb are we, I mean, myself, but like companies just saying, there's a whole market. Why are we not paying attention to the people? We always pay attention to people that are wanting our stuff. Why don't we pay attention to the wider market and make things that actually that they want, not things that we think they want. We think they want things in pink. We think they want things like, no, they want engaging stories. It's like,
I think you make a great point, right? Like bias plays a lot into that,
yeah,
right? And we all wrangle with our own form of it in one way or another. And like my bias in a long time bias was like illustration. I struggled with it in comics and cartoons and graphic novels. And
when we say struggle, what do you mean by struggle with it?
like I don't read them. I never grew up reading comic books ever. I never really, beyond 5th grade, I never really studied, maybe high school, like comic art. I missed the cool indie comic boat with all the weird cartoons. I missed a lot of stuff. I had this big bias, and I'm in the process of trying to break it down now because of exposure, right? And I think I tie that exposure and education together, right? Like I'm meeting all these people, and I guess like you, like when you discovered manga, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like you're like, oh, mind blown. There's a whole world. And I think that's one thing maybe our scene is trying to do with gaming is like expose and break down barriers, right? And
Yeah.
that to me is progress. And I'm like, so I struggle with, in my own biases, like how to overcome what I think is interesting or not interesting and trying to have a different mind. Because
Right.
I mean,
Right.
we like what we like.
Right.
That's one thing. But just not even giving something the time of day. And that's something I struggled with for a long time, like with comics and graphic novels and cartoons. Like,
how about music?
I'm not a very astute, amazing music person. I'm not,
because
like
there's like
all through college, I read Under the Radar magazine. I was really into the indie rock scene and stuff. And then for the last 10 years, I basically listen to like minimalist piano music now.
but I guess the thing is, when you go back to hearing the old stuff that you liked, it's like, to me, what I'm doing is I'm going back to like some of the old stuff I liked. I'm like, why did I even like that? That's really not good. There's some stuff I like and I still like it. There's other stuff I didn't like, but now I'm listening to it, it's like, I really like this. I just was biased against it. Like for no good reason.
No good reason. What our parents teach us usually, I think, some stupid thing like that, or
Well, society, like country music is a terrible thing. I'm not necessarily a big fan of all country music, but country music was not seen as cool, or disco was seen as cool. But now I go back and listen to Parliament and be happy.
It's one of these things where if you can try to overcome those biases, you're richer for it, right? Like, and you can still pick and choose, but good grief, why would you like cut out whole swaths of things, and
Right.
just because. And I think overcoming those things makes you a better person, more interesting, more things, and you get to learn new stories, like in our gaming scene. There, we're like with the internet, we're talking about social media earlier. Like, now you have access to people making stuff from Thailand and Southeast Asia and Latin America and Native American stuff, like, whoa, it's so cool. And almost none of those is rooted in comic books or superheroes. I mean,
right.
Like this big cultural influence. It's like all these minute bubbles and universes to explore. And it's a lot to take in, but it helps you become more of a human being, I think, right?
Well, it's
Sorry,
definitely
am
a
I getting
richer life.
overly philosophical?
No, because
Sorry.
it's like with food. Because I remember when I was young, I wouldn't eat Chinese food because it was just weird. The idea of mixing fruit and meats in a salad was just heretical. You know, you know what I mean? And now it's
Well,
like,
you're from the Midwest?
yes, exactly. But now it's like, and it's something hit me once where I'm like, you know what? If millions of people love this thing, there's probably something to it.
I guess so. I mean, I don't know. We're spending a lot of time talking about inclusivity, I think, here, and progress and openness. I think that's awesome. And I think it's something that I love about where I'm at with my creative work, because it's made me a better person. That's one thing I'm certain of. It's made me more creative. It's made me more interesting. I've learned a lot of interesting things. You know, I have a conversation in any given week with somebody from Brazil, Switzerland, New York, LA, Canada. Wow, that's so cool. And I missed out on social media for a long time as kind of a hermit under a rock. And I guess my mind has just been awesomely blown. And I realized, like all nerd culture stuff, you realize you're not alone. Like, wow, there are people who like these things. And like you with manga or whatever, which is something I've yet to really explore, you know. Berserk just came up today in a conversation I had with someone from Spain. You know, like I am missing that story. I should probably look into it, and I'm excited to explore yet another new thing. And I don't know, but you know, coming from a blue collar family, pros work, 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 that wasn't really part of the mentality either. You know, it was. So I get to build my new universes now.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, as we get older, I think we sometimes are, you know, we have the opportunity to maybe do a little more self-reflection as we maybe do a little more pondering and looking back. I think when you're younger, you're looking forward, but
yeah, well, you got to move forward, right? What's the point of looking back all the time? That's not the world you live in now.
I saw a picture of a guy I went to high school with. It was more recently on Facebook, and he's still wearing the same mullet he did back in the 80s. So some people, there is no change.
Well, but if it works for that person, right?
Oh, right. It's yeah, but it's just
yeah. I mean, taste is another thing, I guess.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with mullets, even though there is. It's just for me, it's just like I'm ready for experiences. As I get older, I want to experience and think and see and deal with more new things, more flavors, more sights.
Totally, man. Like it's one of the things I love about Itch and Kickstarter and Twitter. I'm rich, man. I'm not wealthy by any stretch, but I'm rich, and like I'm constantly like, oh wow, this is awesome. These people are rad, and I'm challenged every day, especially from an art perspective. I'm like, all right, I gotta sit back down to the drawing board. And some days are worse than right. And maybe you for your photography, your writing, you know, like some days are worse than others and harder on yourself than others. I tend to be that way naturally. But at the end of the day or the next day, it's like, oh man, that was so cool. I need to really, you know, and I feel encouraged again. And I imagine that's what it's like. I was never in the music scene per se. When you're in a small city or a city and you got all your bands, friends in bands, and you go to each other's shows all the time, you know, like you're challenged to be better, you're challenged to try and innovate, but then you're also like celebrating their accomplishments, and there's all this circular motion that's really cool.
Well, do you ever, I'm gonna blow up, but do you ever read any G.K. Chesterton?
I tried when I was at a bookshop once. I read one story, I thought it was hilarious, and then I never read anymore. So
he had an essay called, I believe, called like in the defense of the amateur.
Okay.
And his premise was I think if I recall correctly, is that you break down the word, it means basically somebody who does what they love. And we look at amateur as just being amateurish, but in a sense, it's like, I think his thing was like, something's worth doing. What do you say? If something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. As in, like, if you need to do it. Like, it's do it out of love, and there's value in that. And I think that's the thing is everybody, even though they weren't successful, all these bands, they were there because they were doing what they love with people that they love doing things with.
Yeah. It's sometimes hard to remember that positivity, but I think it's important. I think I tweeted the other day something like, man, this happened, this happened, this happened today. And they were all good things.
Yeah.
I was like, I got to remember this, like I'm not great at it, but I mean, we live in a pretty shitty world situation in many ways right now for a lot of people, and things can be good too, creativity, but I still come back to like expanding what you take in is one of the best answers you can have. At least then it lets you know where to stand behind or what to back or who to support because you're aware of it. And we're really waxing philosophic today. That's okay. I don't know. I don't talk to many people, so.
No, in fact, it's on the 10. It is RPG ramblings, which allows me license to talk about anything. So if a conversation wants to go one way, it's fine. No, it's, I mean, the whole point really I've stated is there's a number of reasons why I started this podcast, but one of them is just to meet people and make, not necessarily that my goal is to make friends, but my goal is to make at least, internet friends or increase my circle of people that I just know and can connect to. So, I'm not necessarily.
That's why I jumped on social media when I started this. I mean, obviously it's a great way to market and sell or whatever, which is something I also am interested in trying to do. But yeah, there's a lot of cool people doing cool stuff, right? Like, and I learn a lot almost daily. I feel like I'm learning something from somebody or other, and that's a really great experience. I guess to sort of swerve the boat a little bit, I'd like to ask you about how your journal is coming along. Are you wrapped up with your layout and all that stuff?
Yeah, so the layout is locked in. I uploaded the proof to uploaded to Mixam, so I'm now waiting for the proof copy to come back.
Yeah.
So I've already put an order in with so I end up doing POD so I can reasonably fulfill to it's kind of a mess. I'm going to have, I think I'm going to do an episode on print on demand in the future and one on backer kit, but no, it's coming on good. No, the layout is actually good. I'll just share a frustration. I was going to be very clear. There's times I really hate Adobe InDesign. Like, it blows my mind. So I had a file, a PDF uploaded to Lulu without a problem. Mixam, it would crash. Their system crash multiple times. I tried to do another PDF, it would crash as it was uploading. You immediately get a message saying could not upload, email, and then on the website it would just keep circling forever, and I'd have to cancel out the order all the way back and restart it because it would not stop. It was weird.
It wouldn't take the PDF.
It would not take the PDF. So then I got another guy friend. He tried it, got the same problem. So what I did is I saved the InDesign as an IDML, which is a markup language, is kind of a universal, and then reloaded it. It still happened. So then
too big.
No, it was only like the file is only like. I think like it's not even 11, maybe it's a little bigger. I mean, like 12 megs. It's not big. So then I take that IDML file and upload it to Affinity Publisher. Then export it as a PDF. Mixam takes it right away. So there's something corrupted in that PDF. I could not get away. And I've had another issue before with Adobe where I couldn't save a file. And I looked up and they said, well, this happens sometimes. You have to save as an IDML, reopen it, and then save it It's like,
Weird.
yes.
I'm
So
all
for my
about
week,
affinity tree, man.
you're what?
All about affinity.
Yeah,
That
there's
company
both.
changed my life.
Yeah, it's definitely much more affordable. It does pretty much everything. I've
Yeah.
got a foot in both camps. But
You know, I
anyway,
never learned graphic design, and I'm learning all this up by the seat of my pants for the last 2 years. And my very first pamphlet or two I did in Word. and just did manual measurements and dropped in images, and it was horrible. And then Affinity had a sale, 50% off for
oh
the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing. And I was like, oh my God, this is game changer. So, and then I hear all these people talk about Adobe and monthly subscriptions. And now, granted, it's stronger and has a wider suite of offerings, I think. But man, for $75 to get all three affinities, it's hard to beat.
So what I like about the Affinity is you can switch between the programs while being in the same interface.
Pretty rad.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Like, yeah, I'll like do that and then hop in and do some of the drawing and design
Yes,
and back to layout.
yeah. In Adobe, it's not that way.
Uh,
So anyway, that's done. So I'm actually pretty excited. So
Now Adobe's interfaced with the PDF reader though, which is really amazing, right? Like
yeah.
you get the full PDF reader tool, which is pretty nice editing, interactive PDF stuff, right?
I didn't play around with that much, but yes, there's a lot you can do. But I would say with Publisher, definitely Affinity stuff, most stuff works. There's some things I do like better in Adobe, like they can do text to table. So you can just do the tab, return, tab, and then do the text to table, and it'll take that text and put it right into a table, which is really
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Well, Affinity sucks at tables. That's
Yes,
the one
it does.
thing it's so frustrating. Like I love it until I have to do a table and I'm like, oh man, I'm about to just draw this thing with rulers because so as soon as I get a table tool like that, because a lot of people complain about it, it's gonna be a winner.
Yeah, because first one I did ended up being 3 zines, but it's one product. And so I had tables in every one of them. So some I did as tables, and I changed my mind, and because you could try anchoring them, but that was kind of a mess. And then I tried, instead of doing tables, I just used like highlighted text, or you can not necessarily highlight it, but you can use I was using the decorations to make a table. But that was doing what I wanted. I switched back for several times, and it was just not a mess. But when I go to Adobe, that works well. Like the tables work really well.
Man, that's the story of my layout work. Back and forth a mess. Hopefully I get it. Like it's hard. I admire these people who can sit down with a flat text doc and turn it into a piece of art. Like, I mean, some people like Johan and the Morkboard crowd really go extreme with it, and I think that's really cool too. But even just like knowing how minimal to make something so it looks good, I mean, that's like a whole skill in its own. I really admire it. I'd love to get better at that.
Yeah. So, and I don't, the photography, I'm not really doing much photography anymore, but I used to do photography actually commercial photography for about freelance for about 8 years for a gun magazine.
So you know your way around that stuff.
Yeah. Well, but what I found interesting is I would take the pictures, which I thought were pretty good. But then when the layout guy would put the text with it, the text with the pictures was so much better than the pictures alone. Like it is interesting. Like, and I don't have the chops, but you got the right chops. Like pictures aren't that interesting. The text isn't that interesting.
It's like framing something.
Yeah.
Oh, that piece of art's done. But as soon as you see it framed, you're like, that's done. I notice that all the time. You know, I collect some art and prints, and I'm like, I love this drawing. As soon as you get a good frame on it, oh yeah, this goes on the wall. This looks
The other
great.
thing I thought was kind of weird, and just to really diverge, is have you ever heard of Moo business cards?
Yes.
So I bought them, and then you put your pictures in them, but the format is like very much a rectangle, more of a rectangle than a normal business card. And I found that pretty much anytime I would crop something for that, it a lot of times to me seemed even better. And I come to a theory that I know there's a limit, but I think that the secret is that pictures are made better by cropping. And probably myself does never crops enough.
It doesn't, or you don't.
I don't. And I realize it's like a lot of times if I'm stuck into a weird format and I have to crop, it's like, I kind of like that. And it's like, it's interesting how there's an eye for like the technical side of a thing.
Yeah.
But the cropping is sort of in a way like the editor or the layout person. It's like
cropping's an unsung tool.
Yes, it is.
It really, I mean, really all cropping does to a picture is it dials the drama. You know, one of my favorite painters is a guy named Boek Toymans. He's a Belgian painter. And he'll make paintings of photographs where he cropped something so tight you don't even know what it is almost.
Yeah.
And that's kind of his approach, and you're not really necessarily supposed to know it's whatever, but the drama, so cropping, you know, really gives us that scale, and as soon as you lop off the edges on something, like, oh, that's a whole different thing. I love that about the simple tool of crop.
Yes, exactly. And it's just and I think it's just, you're right. And as far as with layout and with all that, it definitely that is a skill. And as we, you know, you could be a great artist, but then when you go to do layout, you realize I'm in a different field. It's like,
you know, I did Fallen and I just dumped it in a Google Doc, and Guntijo did my layout for the core rules.
Yeah.
I had no idea what is, you know, I told him, like, this is kind of the vibe. And he went away, did his thing, and came back and was like, wow, I had no idea. And I'm still so impressed with what he was able to do with my words. And I can't wait to get better, frankly. It seems like such a great asset to have.
Yeah, I for Fane, I got my daughter to do the layout because she's much better at the stuff than I am. But the thing is, it's like, you know, it's kind of like with the art, it's like, in fact, there's a point where she got stalled. And I knew I couldn't finish it because I'm not her. Like,
it's its own vision, right?
Yes, exactly. It's like,
totally.
It's so,
I think, but that's why you pay for it, right? Like,
oh yeah,
just like a good editor. I mean, I've put out books that I didn't edit and I didn't do enough editing. Then you pay somebody to edit, and you're like, yep, that's why I did that. And now a lot of people can't always afford those tools and those people with those skills. I don't know. The goal is to get to a point where we can do that, right? We can afford good layout, good art, good editing. But anyway.
So I hired a copy editor one time. Well, and it came back and it was like red all over. It was like, and I felt, I mean, I don't normally feel discouraged, but I felt pretty discouraged. But then it like hit me. It's like, she can't write the nonsense that I write. Like,
yeah,
I write a lot of nonsense. Like, you know, that's my value in the world, is I can write nonsense. It's like, but I definitely need somebody to trim it up and clean it. So it's like,
nonsense is valuable, but if it's missing periods and commas,
yes, you don't want any barriers between the reader and what you're producing.
So on that note, you know, with Fallen, there are typos in the current edition and errors, and it does just detract a little from people's reading of it, you know, and it's so frustrating. I'm really grateful when people are like, hey, this needs fixed, because I wouldn't maybe notice or whatever, but it's discouraging because it's like, damn, I need to put more time into this part. And I just take that as my learning, you know. I'd like to work on a Fallen 2E and you better believe I'm gonna like have like 4 people combing it all the time next time.
Well, the way I
Because
look,
you're,
go ahead.
well, it's just a disservice to readers if you give them too many faults, right? You're not,
Yes.
you have to trust readers to a degree and let them do some work, whatever happens, but you owe them a decent thing, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like, and also the thing I was going to say too, is, me looking at what I've been doing, I consider like these first couple years, few years to be like, it's school for doing what I'm doing. So,
Mhm.
same thing for you. It's like, things were costly, but it worked okay, but still cheaper than getting a bachelor's degree in making zines.
Right? I
It's part of your
mean,
tuition
the
fee. You're like,
tools,
okay.
I switched out of graphic design and went into fine art way back. And now I kind of regret that, but I am at school every day practically. I tell my wife all the time, I'm practically in graduate school,
Yes.
learning from really amazing teachers who just happen to usually just be other designers who are just good at it. And it's more fun than spending 80 grand on a degree, like you said.
Yes, it is.
Because I'm sure as I'm not going to pay off my debt, that debt with the zines, like you just said too.
Exactly.
So,
But
yeah. Well, man, this has been a really fun chat. I think I'm gonna wrap up this piece and
it
and
sounds good. I got a dog I need to pick up. So
there
anyway,
you go, man.
well, thank you,
Jeff, thank you so
PR.
much. Yeah, have an awesome day. Good luck with your. I know it can be stressful, so
Well, I
I
already
hope it
know it
works out
is.
for you.
So yes, it's always those unforeseen things like the Adobe hiccups and such, but that's part of it, part of education.
It is. Yeah, man. Have a wonderful day.
You too, PR. Take care.
Cheers.